Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for joining today. I am super excited to bring a 1L perspective today with my friends Lindsay and Kevin.
My name's Lindsay. I'm a 1L here at Stanford, and I went to the University of Southern California for my undergrad. I just graduated in May, so I'm what they call a straight through because I didn't take any time off, and I'm originally from Chicago. Well, the suburbs of Chicago.
Important.
I'm Kevin. I'm a 1L here at Stanford as well. I went to UC Davis. I graduated in June of 2018, so that meant I had a full year to get ready for law school. I was working at Shepherd Mullen, which is a law firm. It's pretty big in California, and I'm from the Bay Area, from Fremont, so Stanford's always been in my backyard.
Nice. So working at the firm didn't scare you off from law school?
Oh, it almost did. It almost
Because
did.
I hear that sometimes that people are like, after being a paralegal, there's no way I would ever go to law school.
Yeah, I could definitely see that because if you can't learn to make it work with the kind of big personalities that exist in big law firms, you're going to have a lot of personal trouble. But I just have the kind of personality where that stuff, it bothers me, but I can get over it by leaving work.
Healthy
Yes.
tip. Just extricate yourself
get
from
out
the
of there.
situation.
Yeah, so my mom's a big fan of Googling and YouTubing anything when she doesn't know how to do it. She's so hip.
Yeah.
She has a Twitter. And I kept coming to her and saying, I'm super stressed and anxious about law school. And she'll be like, have you YouTubed that? So finally, I heeded her advice. And I think your videos were the first things that came up on.
I found Esther's channel by through the recommended videos page on YouTube, like the little sidebar when I was studying for the LSAT and just watching Seven Sage and stuff, and then I guess they figured out that I was going to law school or thinking about it, so they started sending me day in the life of a Harvard 1L, day in the life of the Stanford 1L, and or something like that, and that's how I found Esther's channel, and then I ended up watching almost all of the content. Yeah.
We talked about it at Bar Review.
Yes,
That's how we met.
Yes.
Bar Review is not actually studying for the bar. It's the world's worst and most widespread law pun.
Yeah,
Bar
it's terrible.
Review. You go to a bar.
You should get over it. It's not that funny.
I still think it's funny.
Secretly, everyone loves it. I guess I'm curious whether you guys knew you always wanted to go to law school, because one of the things that I talk about on my channel is that I definitely did not know that I wanted to, even up until the point that I got in. I was like, if I get into a good school, great, I'll try it out.
For me, I do have an uncle who's an attorney as well as an aunt. But I think I discovered it sort of on my own. I was in 4th grade and we did a mock trial. Yeah.
So cute.
Was it? I got
4th
super
graders
into
doing
the
a mock trial? That is objectively cute.
Yeah.
Okay, we
That's
also put
adorable.
Rumpelstiltskin on trial, so it was even
Whoa.
cuter.
Rumpelstiltskin?
Yeah.
For what?
For I guess hiding the girl. It was false imprisonment or
False
something
imprisonment?
like
Yeah,
that.
that's a
Yeah.
tort.
Stole the baby.
Yeah. Forcing her to twirl gold or something.
Yeah,
basically.
evil.
So
Yeah.
it was a tort. I don't know.
Let's go with
Let's
that.
go with the tort.
Maybe there was a contract involved.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I don't remember, but that sounds legit.
It was pretty legit, and I
Yeah.
got super into it. And I think just after that, my mom had me watch Legally Blonde for the first time,
A classic.
and that's when I knew.
True
that I was
American.
going to law school.
It spoke to me deep in my
Yeah.
heart. No, I rewatched Legally Blonde 2 years ago, and it held up really well.
It did.
And if you watch it while you're in law school, you're like, this is pretty accurate and actually pretty feminist.
It's an American classic
Yes.
in terms of films in the last 20 years. Yeah, it's a great film. Okay, so how did I decide to go to law school? Well, when I was in grade school, I was always really good at reading and writing. And I remember I had teachers be like, no one scores this high on my reading test, Kevin. You should really think about where you can apply these skills. And then, so I majored in English in college, and I thought eventually I would be a professor. And then I took philosophy, and then I thought maybe I could be a philosophy professor. That sounds like a lot of fun to me. And then I took sociology, and I didn't get to major in sociology. I got a minor in it, but studying sociology actually made me realize that my skills would probably be best placed on the ground and not in the high tower that is academia.
Yeah.
And there was a kind of moral duty I felt as being somebody who came from like a first generation low income background, and no one in my family knows anything about the law. I'm the first, and I have like family members have had serious run-ins with the law, and there was no recourse available to them, and no just like general advice that anyone could give them. So, it was like a golden opportunity around 2016 when I started realizing that, hey, I can actually like really make positive change on the ground in people's lives by pursuing a legal education.
Well, one thing I'm really excited to talk to you guys about is your 1L perspective, because I started out the channel from like the depths of 1L misery, just being like, let's talk about what is happening here, because it sucks. And I feel like nobody prepared me for it. But now I'm a 3L, and so my brain has like mercifully wiped away a lot of that. Just be good to get like a fresh perspective on it. And it's also great if it's not that hard for you guys. I mean, it's like a very personal thing. I'm interested to hear like what your hardest class was and what you like and don't like about it so far.
Okay. So when Esther was a 1L, there was a movement, I guess, on campus called RLHT, Racism Lives Here Too, and a bunch of students kind of acted together to expose some problems, some institutional issues that Stanford has. And so
I should say Stanford has them. Every law school has
yes,
them.
and we should also, yeah.
There were some, sister movements at other like top law schools around the same time.
Right. So if you're a 1L this year, we are experiencing a kind of different curriculum load than what Esther experienced. And so we have one less doctrinal class than Esther had in her 1L. And while that may seem like a great thing, it still means that everything is still moving at a really, really fast pace. And, I think it's fairly difficult still. I mean, is it easy?
I mean,
should we think it's easy?
No. That's not the implication at all. I think, part of what's hard about it is that, like, it's a totally different vocabulary and way of thinking about things. And I feel that, some professors have been doing this for so long that they kind of forget how steep that learning curve is. So even if the number of classes or the amount of material is a little bit less, not even that much less, it's still difficult to, like, ramp yourself up, I think, right?
I would definitely agree with that. And I also think the only times that I think it's easy is when I think, oh, I could have one more class. And then I'm like, oh, crap, okay, let me not complain.
Yeah.
But it's still very difficult.
Right.
It's still a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't by any means call it easy.
Yeah. Regardless of whether we had 3 or 4 doctrinal classes in our fall 1L, we would still be triaging in some way. Like even now, there are moments where I'm like, I can't do this reading. I really need to go to bed. I'm going to have to go to class tomorrow. Hope I don't get called on, and then read this case Saturday morning or Sunday morning or whenever I next find that I have some time. And I feel like that just would have been the case more often with one more doctrinal course. Yeah. Regardless, it's too much information. The fluency requirements are insane. So wherever you go to law school, we're all suffering. We're all trying to figure out what the heck jurisdiction is and why there's like 3 different versions of it, and none of it makes sense except to your professor, who seems to be like the most confident person on planet Earth. And that could be kind of like disheartening and make it hard to like feel like you belong in a law school. But just remember, I'm pretty sure literally everybody in law school is feeling some version of this.
Yeah, that's true. And it doesn't go away. So like as a 3L, well, it doesn't totally go away. I'm in a class where we're still like, is there jurisdiction? Supreme Court's like, no, surprise, it's not. It's like, why? And then you read the cases and it becomes very obvious that like, oh, these high level practitioners also were like, wait, what? So, it's,
right.
But I say that to kind of hopefully be comforting in that it's not just like, if you feel like you're struggling, it's like you personally can't figure this out. It's like, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
It's difficult. It's like a lot, volume-wise. So what do you think your hardest class is this quarter?
Yeah, you go first now.
For me, this is very weird because I came in thinking I would absolutely love torts because it's all about creating incentives that are the most efficient and the most cost-effective.
Well, before that, why don't we briefly explain so 1Ls take a standardized set of doctrinal classes. Here that includes civil procedure, torts, contracts, and legal reading. Legal research and writing. And it used to include criminal law, but that's been moved to another quarter. So torts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd love torts because I was basically an econ major in undergrad, but that has proven to be like the hardest class this year, and I think it's more so just because of the way that it's taught. There's a lot of cases and not so much time to sort of contextualize that under like this is negligence, this is causation. It's just kind of like we're going to go through 10 cases today and okay, bye. And so it makes it very hard to understand exactly how this fits into like the broader scheme. So I think that's why torts is hardest for me.
Right.
I feel like a decent number of them are notes cases too,
Exactly.
where like the textbook doesn't lay out the entire opinion of the case. You can get the context. It's like 2 or 3 lines. It's like a barge crashed into another barge.
Whoops.
What do we do?
Well, I can't really
Judge didn't say negligence on this one because ...
Because
A said so.
Yeah, like, you can't really make a lot out of like such a little snippet, I feel.
So I'm with Lindsay and I are in the same section, so we actually are taking the same exact courses with the same professors.
Which is a coincidence.
Yes. And I would agree that torts is the most difficult class, but I would say it for different reasons. So I think that the doctrine itself, coming from someone from my background and studying sociology, you might realize that the torts doctrine is like neoliberal, and this like cost-effective analysis that goes on in torts it's really conducive to corporations and profit making and protecting the interests of the powerful and the wealthy. And so a lot of times the plaintiffs, the people submitting complaints to the court in these cases, are just individuals, just normal people who just got caught up in a system or a railroad set something on fire that they owned, or a
That's
boat.
actually most of torts.
Yeah, most of torts is a railroad set
Someone
something on
stacked some
fire.
hay and it got lit on fire. Like,
Yeah, and
it's tough out there.
just there are average people out there, and courts, especially at the higher tier court you go, it seems like corporations always win.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to get over that, especially when you might want to bring that up in class and kind of point a finger and maybe try to have like a constructive conversation about it, but there's no room in a doctrinal class to ask those critical questions. Because like Lindsay mentioned, the pace at which that we're running is so incredibly fast. We got 90 minutes to go through 10 cases. We are talking about the doctrine, and there really is no time to activate that. Well, what is the big picture here, and who really benefits from the way that the doctrine is set up? And so I'm sitting there in class, and I can't turn that off because that is my education, is constantly thinking through critical questions. And it's just been really good and to kind of like predict where this conversation is going to go. My favorite thing about Stanford Law is that I found a bunch of students who share this feeling, this icky feeling we have when we're studying the doctrine, and we start to ask like the moral question, like what about fairness in these cases? What about justice? And kind of like starting to build a community, even in my 1L, of just like students who don't necessarily want to take in the doctrine without thinking too critically about it, and want to maybe not perpetuate all of its ills.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of the most frustrating things about the doctrinal curriculum is that, it's meant to sort of push you through and like give you this baseline with which ostensibly you can, have a foundation and then develop it later. But I find that what happens is that people just sort of take in those assumptions and then sort of forget that they ever thought differently from that. It becomes really normalized. And especially in torts, there are a lot of assumptions underlying the doctrine that are very problematic, like wealth creation is, happiness creation, that sort of thing.
Right.
Lindsay, what's your favorite thing about Stanford so far?
I think largely it's the people. Like Kevin was mentioning, there's such a wonderful assortment of people at this school that all come from different backgrounds, and the fact that we can all come together and actually share a lot of the same opinions about how these structures have just systematically oppressed people. That's
the most fun thing about
but it's wonderful because I feel like there wasn't a lot of space for conversations like that in undergrad because everyone was studying different things, but here we're all talking about the same cases, the same problems all the time, so there's a lot of room for like collective thinking and collective action, and I really love that. But I think it's just wonderfully casual. I was really, really scared that it would be a la like Paper Chase or Legally Blonde, and that I'd be called by my last name all the time and scared to go to class, but that's very much not the case here. I feel that everyone's just very laid back, and for the most part, people don't take themselves too seriously, and it's really about just learning.
Even that professor, our torts professor, is an incredibly nice person, and he will let you skip questions if you don't feel comfortable that day. And he told us that on the first day of class. He also told us that it would be okay not to get the H or the honors in the class, and that we would be fine, and we would breathe and be human beings and still graduate from Stanford Law School. And just
What?
there are
Great.
real.
You didn't tell us that.
Oh,
Maybe after our class, he was like, "Oh, I need to have a talk with."
right. But that was very heartening to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I think that it helps that our school is really small, because I have friends at the other top law schools where those incoming classes are like maybe 500 more students than ours, and then it gets difficult to know everyone. Where at Stanford Law, our 1L class is 180 students. So yeah, I know everybody. I know almost everyone's name. I've had conversations with almost everyone already, and it's only been about a month and a half. And it's really easy to build like a casual community of friends, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about what's been sort of surprising about your law school experience, or maybe there's nothing and you were like super ready to go.
I think how casual and laid back it is was definitely surprising. The culture here is really lovely and really conducive to, I think, being secure in yourself, I would suppose. But I will say that, like, one of the hard things for me, at least, is I tend to be very quiet in class. I'm not someone who wants to talk or needs to talk unless I'm called on and forced to talk. And so I think I've had a hard time sort of balancing being true to myself, which means being quiet and going back home and sort of contextualizing everything that I've heard and absorbed, and sort of taking advantage of where I'm at and taking up space in class and adding something to the conversation when I feel that I have something of value to say and not feeling bad about that. So I think that's been something that's pretty hard for me.
Yeah, I just want to note, Lindsay is an incredible classmate, and almost everything that she says, I'm like, oh my god, how did you know that? Like, I've asked her, like, pulled her aside, like, what was that thing you mentioned in class? Like, when did we talk about that? And,
but I've done the same to him, so everyone here is like really smart.
I feel like we should encourage each other to take up space in the classroom, especially people who don't feel like they belong in law school, because maybe we are the people who need to be in law school.
100%. Yes.
And so the most surprising thing for me about law school is how much I've received this advice, which was essentially, Kevin, don't lose yourself in law school, which is, I have like a personality, and I like to have fun and stuff, and even my Civ Pro professor told me, Kevin, cut out time in the day for yourself and maybe start to read a little more, what he said, instrumentally, which was essentially the shorthand version of saying you don't have to read every single word in every single case. You need to get the gist of it, you need to get the doctrinal points, and then come to class prepared to ask questions. And that doesn't mean that I have to, spend every waking second of my day reading my case books. I probably should, but I don't have to. And I need,
you should either.
Yes, I need to prepare in the long run. That I have cultivated myself as a person, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to become the automaton. I don't want to become the robotic lawyer who can't relate to my clients. I want to remain myself. Right, so that's been really, really nice to hear, and very, very, very surprising, especially coming from professors who can tell that they work a lot.
Yeah. No, I think it's great that you bring up the long run, because one of the things that I realized early on is part of the value that law school gives to like firms and our future employers is that inculcation in a certain work culture, and a lot of us have that already, because to get where we are today, we had to be a certain type of like gold star, studious type of personality, but law school I think really takes it to another level. And if you don't actively resist that, then it seems very easy to just become like a sort of person who your whole value derives from your work and your busyness. And it takes a lot of active resistance to that, starting in the beginning. So do you guys have any 1L perspective advice about, let's do first law school and then maybe the application process?
Ooh. I have application process,
Oh,
but
okay.
definitely not law school. Hasn't been long enough for me
It might
to
be too
like,
early for the law school process.
Yeah,
Besides
I'll
anything.
hold my advice on your 1L too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds
wait
good.
until I get my exam grades.
applications. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are very close to the application
Yes.
process. So that sounds good.
You can watch Esther's videos though.
Oh yeah,
Esther's
that's how I
1L
prepare.
perspective videos, retrospective videos. That was very helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
The multicolor highlight. Sorry.
Oh, I remember we had like a session during orientation where we were learning how to case brief, and I think it was Professor Sinar who was like literally giving like color code, and I was like writing it down furiously. Oh my god! I feel like sometimes it is, you know, you have the capacity to like obviously process the high level material, but these little like life management things.
Yeah.
If you don't grow up in a certain environment, you just never think to make your own life easier through these tiny little steps. But it is sort of important.
Yes.
Yeah.
But application advice.
Oh, start early. I took the November LSAT the year before, so I guess last November, and at that point I had not written a single personal statement, essay, or even attempted to think of an idea. I hadn't talked to anyone about getting recommendations, and I basically waited until I got my scores back in December before I decided, okay, I'm going to apply for this cycle. And I ended up applying to all of my schools on the deadline, and that was just not a good idea.
Stressful.
Yeah, it was.
But the bright
Lindsay
point of
did
that
well for
story is that
herself.
like you can do really well
You can
for
still-
yourself. Like
Yes.
it can work out amazingly.
It could work.
So, but maybe not recommended.
I would not recommend it. My winter break was not fun. I spent most of it in my hometown library, just like writing personal
Furiously,
statements. Yeah, and just trying to come up with something. And so, yes, I'd recommend to start early. Ask your recommenders well in advance of when you think you're going to be applying, just so you have it. And yeah, before you even take the LSAT, I'd recommend having an idea for a personal statement.
Yeah, the personal statement is, I think, a particularly daunting genre of writing. It's so awkward to write about yourself and to kind of try to guess what will be interesting to someone who sees thousands and thousands of these essays. Yeah.
So my advice on the application process would be find the middle ground between honesty and professionalism. So I'll give some advice that was given to me from the associate dean here at Stanford Law that was given to her by Sotomayor, which was
That's quite a lineage.
Right.
For this advice, I suppose.
So when I eventually got this advice, I was like, oh, maybe I should really like think about this in my application, which was they want people going to law school who are going to, quote, fight the good fight, whatever that means to you. Find out what that means to you and think about how you can position that in your personal statement and how you want to be a steward of good change in the world, right? Not necessarily the mechanism by which, you know, everything changes, but you want to play your part and you want to be aware of the big structural issues at play in your life as well as the life of others who the law affects. And so finding that little piece of honesty was very, very helpful. And then finding out how to say that in a professional way so I didn't sound like I was on a soapbox.
Yeah.
That took, for me, it took months. I think I had like 30 drafts of my personal statement.
Oh, wow.
And I had very serious editors. I couldn't afford to get one of the like professional editors, but I had friends that I trusted and they made that stuff bleed. And even at the end, I was fairly uncomfortable with my final draft of my personal statement, but it at the very least, I think that I struck some kind of middle ground between I want to come off as someone who you can have an honest conversation with, someone who understands the emotionality and the struggle of the little person, but then also can articulate that struggle in a way that's not like firebrand, right? So although that might be how I feel on the inside, I understand, you know, there's context going on, and we have to have honest and like adult conversations about stuff. So yeah, strike that middle ground, and I think you might impress, right? And you can really talk about those like really personal things, but in a way that anyone could respect.
Yeah. No, and I think having friends edit your personal statement is actually probably better in a lot of ways than having professional editors, because what you're trying to convey through your personal statement is sort of a distillation of yourself, and people who know you can help you sort of forge that, but someone who's just a stranger is only going to edit for technical things,
Right.
or, you know, what they think is like an ideal personal statement. but I think uniqueness, individuality is very important in that.
Definitely.
And authenticity.
Yeah.
Genuinely letting yourself come
Yeah.
through in your personal statement, I think makes it feel a lot more honest when you go back and read it to anyone who reads it, regardless of whether they know you or not.
100%.
Yeah.
One last piece of advice that I would give you before you start your 1L is to get your life in order.
Yeah.
Really,
That's very important.
I mean, Lindsay probably didn't have that much time because she graduated and then almost immediately started law school. You had a couple of months, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I spent all of that time working.
Yeah.
So it didn't, no.
Okay, so sometimes you have to do that, and we can like understand, but if you have a year or a gap, really get your life in order. And you don't want to look back at the summer before 1L and be like, wow, I missed so many opportunities to like live my life. No, please go live your life, because you will have to make sacrifices in your 1L. Maybe start that gym routine, fix your sleep schedule, maybe think about learning how to cook, really work out your relationship with your parents, make sure everything looks good, everything's calm before you jump into the hellfire that is law school.
I think that's a lot of that is about developing strategies, especially around like mental health, because I find that you will have issues that come up during law school for sure. Like it's a very stressful time, and you may not be able to like just tamp them down and get rid of them, but if you know how to deal with them already, if you've put some time and thought into how you deal with them, then that's like 90% of the work. Right? So
I would also add, sort of along both of those lines, it's, I think, really important to have a very secure sense of self when you come here. And I think it's very easy to get swept up in what everyone else is doing and feel like very insecure about whether you're smart enough to be here, whether you're qualified enough to be among a room of really intelligent people. But I think that it's really important to be secure that you've gotten this far and you know what works for you, and you know how to get where you need to be. And so I think if you're not susceptible to feeling like you're nothing just because you see everyone else around you doing something else, I think that's really important.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much again. This was awesome.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Subscribe, whatever. And, we will see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Bye.